So I'm going to interview for 10 minutes David, who's come to be our current inspector with us. And then I'm going to interview Kate. And I've prepared three questions for them, which I hope will be helpful. And you will then have a chance to go into groups and talk about what Kate and David have said and talk about how you're preparing for your next SIAMS when that happens to be. So, David, I'll start with you. So, David, here are my three questions, and I'm timing myself so that we finish at just after 10 past. So, what might a SIAMS inspector ask for from the school prior to the inspection? And would that be clear in the initial conversation with the head teacher?
I think the initial conversation is particularly important. It allows the inspector to begin a conversation, and I very much mean a conversation with the head teacher. So they're going to be discussing about the day and the format and what's going to happen. But most of all, I need to gain from the school the four documents, the four pieces of information that I really do need to begin the inspection. I think those four pieces of evidence are clear. The first one is your SIAMS CEF in whatever form. If you've got one, it is what I need to begin. Now, however long is entirely up to you, however short, regardless, it's a very helpful document for me, and I would think it possibly is a helpful document for you. The second one, which I believe would be readily available, is your school development plan. Again, whatever format. Does it have reference to being a church school or RE or collective worship? If there are different appendices, then again, that's what I need to see. The third piece is really for context for the school, and that's your most recent IDSR. And that's used to give me an understanding of what the background is to your school in terms of SEND needs, ethnicity, EAL. So I draw upon that for context. Context is very important. Your school is part of a context, and it's my role to understand that. So the IDSR is very important. And the final piece of information is your vision statement, but no more than 100 words. Why no more? Because else it doesn't fit on the front of the report. So if you go over, I will politely ask you, please chop it back. If it's 103, 104, 105, that's fine. But 250 just doesn't fit. So those are the four things that I need from you that day. And believe you me, it's a tight schedule for myself because I will receive it. I will then, as you will know, prepare a PIP, pre-inspection plan, and you'll get that back 2 days before the inspection. And the preschool inspection plan is really a heads up. And I'm saying, this looks to be strong, and I want to find out how strong is it. And that's a theme that's occurring more and more. I remember one head saying to me, I thought that was quite good. And I'm saying, I agree with you. I think it's one of your strengths. How strong is it? Is it so strong? I need to be talking to Pauline Dodds so that she can get this information out, that Stigumber does the best collective worship in the whole of West Somerset. So people can make a beeline to Stigumber to go and find out. And then the day afterwards, I'll have a conversation with you on the phone to see if you've got any questions. In that call, I'm going to ask you about your vision. I'm going to ask you how it was made. I'm going to ask you what it means to you and the difference it makes. And the last two pieces of that jigsaw, I'll talk to you about RE and I'll talk to you about collective worship. So I've begun to build a picture. But all the answers are in your schools, and you know far, far more than anyone else. So it's you I'm coming to. Pauline, does
Thank
that answer it?
Yes, it does. We'll move on to the second question. I'm just quickly going to ask David Williams if he can answer. Just somebody's asked what an IDSR is. So David Williams, perhaps you could answer that in the chat. That would be helpful. David Hattrey, from your experience of inspection under the new framework, are there common points for development?
I'm not totally convinced that there are. I mean, the last SIAMS report drew out 2 or 3, but every school is on a different point of its journey. Everyone starts at a given point. They do their evaluation, they decide what they think is making a difference, and then they prioritize actions. And that's as it should be. Everyone is on a different journey. So the overall answer is no. However, I would say in IQ3, spirituality in collective worship is an emerging feature. And I would still say from IQ5, courageous advocacy is and remains an area that a lot of schools are developing. What I tend to see is that this is often led by adults and staff. They talk about this with pupils, they direct them, and I hate to say this, but if you put all the cake sales end to end in Somerset, I don't know where you would end up. But there's a huge number of cake sales going on. But I think what SIAMS is looking for is something beyond that as well. I'm not saying you don't have the cake sale for whatever, but it needs to go beyond. And what does that look like? And what ownership have pupils got?
Thank you. Thank you. That's really interesting. I think I would agree from what I've been hearing that spirituality is quite a feature in the new framework. Okay. And finally, David, what one piece of advice would you give to those here who are probably preparing for their next SIAMS, whenever that might be? One piece of advice.
I think simply for all the initiatives that you have or you're considering, look at them through the lens of your school vision. What is it in your vision that's driving you, pushing you, directing you to do this? Does it emanate from your vision? And I think if you think it through, you'll be able to trace through from your vision to your action. But I would have to say the greatest piece of advice I could give is be evaluative. As an ex-head teacher, like many of you here, I could talk all day on what the school does. I could give you lavish accounts. I'm not too interested in that. What I'm interested in is what difference does it make? What is the impact? And if you can't tell me about the impact, I'm afraid that might begin to ring a few bells. So I'm looking for impact, not description, impact.
Thank you, David. That's really helpful. And as I've said before, for the people who've arrived a little bit later, you're going to have a chance to talk about these things that David has said and the things that Kate is going to say. We will have a good 15 minutes for discussion after this bit. Kate, over to you. For those who've just arrived, Kate is a head teacher in Crocombe and Sturgumber, small village schools. She's recently had an inspection, and as it happens, David was her inspector. So, Kate, over to you. What sort of self-evaluation evidence did you gather in preparation for your SIAMS? What kind of evidence?
Okay, so I worked very closely with our ethos committee, who are made up of members of our governing board, our foundation governors, some people from our local church community, and we had some parents as well. And we meet every term, and we have a focus on a different inspection question, and we talk it through. Predominantly, myself and my governors do some learning walks or some monitoring within our schools, and then we gather that information together and have a discussion, a focused discussion at each ethos meeting regarding that area. Last year, I started at my current schools 18 months ago. And so we were at the beginning of our journey. And so we last year actually did meet every half term. So we did have 6 meetings so that we could make sure we covered as much of the SIAMS inspection as we could. And we included notes within the ongoing SIAMS framework that's on the Bath and Wales website. We found that really useful. And then we also, for our own benefit, we built a kind of a big floor book of our journey of the year, because we were developing our vision as part of that. And so that then provided us with evidence for the different things we've done throughout the year. And that was really helpful. Then in the summer, I could sit back and reflect on all of our ethos notes and our ongoing inspection to write a summary overall inspection, which is what was shared with David. He received that following the phone call.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really helpful and concise. How important, Kate, was your theologically rooted Christian vision?
Extremely. I think that is the absolute root of everything that happened. That happens in our schools, regardless of SIAMS. It's one of the most important things that people need to work on and develop. I would say it was at the heart of the entire SIAMS inspection. My phone conversation with David on the first day was very much about what our theologically rooted vision is, how we came about it. It was about our communities in our area, and every single thread of our pre-inspection, our PIP, had some aspect of our vision within it. So if, for example, we had discussed something that was very important to our community was about diversity, we would find that within the things that David was looking at. He was trying to explore how much our vision was in everything. And we had spent a long time last year. We had really focused on our theologically rooted vision, and spent a lot of time as a team unpicking what our community needed, what our schools represented, why we were here. And we've then used that vision within our curriculum, within everything. So it's absolutely fundamentally key that part I felt was right. And that's what drives us, regardless of SIAMS. That's the bit that drives our schools. So I would say hugely important. And it wasn't just about me knowing it or me saying what I thought my vision was. It was very much a community. We had pupils involved, we had members of the public and the community involved, the church involved. And I think finding what's right for your school will really help you then know where you want to go next. So I think absolutely key.
Thank you very much. And the same question that I asked David, what one piece of advice would you give to those gathered here preparing their next SIAMS, whenever it is?
Be honest, be open and be honest. We are all on a journey. There was big chunks that we were still on our journey. We had a lot of work still to do. We didn't try to hide or pretend that we'd done anything. And it very much was a process of us working together. I would agree with David about being evaluative and thinking about what impact what you've had and then what would be next. But it isn't a done to, or this process definitely was not at all a done to. It was a done with, and it's about being open and honest, reflective of yourself, and using it as an opportunity to help your schools, because I really think that's what this process is all about.
Thank you. That's really helpful, David and Kate. And what we're going to do now, we're going to go into groups for, I think probably maybe let's say 12 minutes. I did say 15, but I think there's going to be probably a lot of questions afterwards. So I'd like us to go into groups to talk about what David and Kate have said, reflecting on that yourselves. But also what I'd like you to do is think about one question per group, not per person, one question per group for either David or Kate, and that will form the last 20 minutes of our hour together. We will endeavour to answer, or Kate and David will endeavour to answer as many of those as possible. So if you could write them in the chat when you've come up in your group with one question or comment. Not going to ask you to speak it, but please, if you could put it in the chat, and that will mean we'll have 10, 12 questions for Kate and David to deal with afterwards. So we're going to go into groups. We're going to chat about what we've heard. And please, in your group, one question. If you could put that in the chat, and we will deal with that in the last third of the hour. Okay, so I will see you soon. Welcome back. Apologies for those who had problems with getting into a group. I don't know quite what's happened, but yeah, apologies for that. And I know one or two people have joined us. For those who've joined later, if I can just say what we have been doing. We have David Hatchery, who is a current inspector, and we have Kate Lewis, who is a head teacher of 2 small schools, who's recently been inspected. And so what I've asked, and I hope you had a good conversation, but could each group please put one comment or question in the chat, and we'll deal with them. So Andrew's group, and I don't know which group it was, please only one question per group, otherwise we will run out of time. This is a question for Kate. Did you have to gather a lot of information on the day? And what was that information? Question mark. People? Question mark. Or documents? So I think that's what did you have to have on the day? Whereas I think David has said what you required beforehand.
Okay, yeah. So on the day, one of the things that we were asked for was copies of our governor minutes so that we could evidence that the governors had been talking about the church distinctiveness of our schools and our vision. And initially we realised that actually we only gave over our full governing meeting minutes, and actually we then didn't really have enough evidence of how much we were discussing it. But when we realised that actually most of those discussions are within our ethos committee minutes, we actually then produced those as well. So that was really helpful to have our ethos committee minutes and our full governing minutes. We did need our, so I met with David a lot on the day. My chair of governors and I started the day off depending on what your focus was. So we had a particular focus regarding our disadvantaged children and children with SEND. So my SENCO was involved, my RE coordinator was involved, and my governing body. And it was not just my foundation governors. My foundation governors were there, but actually I was very fortunate that the majority of the members of my governing body came, and that was really helpful because that showed that it wasn't just our foundation governors that got involved, but it was all of our governors. We looked at our ebooks in the day. We observed collective worship. We have collective worship ambassadors who help us plan and lead our collective worship. So David met with them and they had to explain what their role was. And parents came in. There was a section with parents and also members of the community. So we had representatives from the church who met with David as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. This one's for you, David. What evidence are SIAMS inspectors looking for to show spiritual development?
I think that's a really interesting question, Pauline. Answers on a postcard and send it goodness knows where. I think the evidence I'll be looking for is what are children saying? And you can only ascertain that by having discussions, conferencing with pupils themselves. What are they saying? Are they able to talk about it? And if they are, then it's making some difference. But what are they saying and how are you recording it? Is it making a difference to their thinking? That's an area I do talk to children about. I talk to the school, what word do they use for spirituality? Is it reflection, whatever, and talk with them. And are they able to come back to me and share some thoughts? I'm not looking for a PhD, thank goodness. It's simple. And bearing in mind, these are children between 7 and 11. It's age appropriate. I hope that answers. I'm not sure it does, to be honest.
No, I think that's helpful. Thank you, David. I think the next two questions, I think for Kate are they're I think they're saying the same thing. So they want a bit of one group said they'd like a little bit of about what the process might look like on the day. And the group discussed how important their vision is and also developments in spirituality. So the other group said, we'd appreciate a bit more detail about the process from Kate.
Okay, so I would say the process very much starts prior to the day. So I'll happily talk you through our process. So I happened to be out at an English Hub conference on the day we received the phone call at school. So I was asked to phone back. So I did, just to inform us that we were having our inspection. And then my phone call with David was that afternoon. And my phone call with David was probably about an hour and a half long. And we had lots of discussion about our vision, our focus area for the school, what we were working on, how we self-evaluated, how we met the framework questions. And then we talked through what the structure of the day would look like. For the actual inspection. That was a week before our SIAMS inspection. I then received we had a discussion about what kind of the timetable of the day would look like. And I received 2 days before the inspection, I received what our focus was going to be. So each area inspection question had a focus area and a proposed timetable for the day. And I was then able to adjust that to fit in with our school day. So for example, observing RE, we needed to make sure that would fit in when we were having RE. We weren't having to change our school day to fit around David. David was having to change his day to fit around us. When our governors were available to come in, when it would work for my Senko to meet with him. So then I adjusted what he'd covered in the day into a timetable and sent that back so that we all of my staff then got shared exactly what the focus was and what the day would look like. On the morning, obviously David arrived, got signed in, checked in by the office staff, all the usual safeguarding arrangements. Make sure you welcome them, give them tea and coffee, that definitely helps. And we started off with a discussion about how the day would go, and once again it was a discussion about our vision. And then each day is slightly different depending on how your focus is. As I say, we had observed RE lessons. I've got 2 schools, and so we had 2 days, whereas that obviously isn't necessarily what other people would have. And one of my schools is a VA school and one of my schools is a VC school, so that makes a difference. So although David did watch RE being taught in both schools, he was only writing regarding that inspection question for one of my schools, which was the VA school. But we met with the RE lead. We talked about the RE curriculum. We spoke with children of all ages. It was really important. One of the things we needed to work on and develop was the children's vocabulary and their understanding of some really key vocabulary and words, which maybe we hadn't emphasised enough. Another thing was when David would ask us questions, he often would go back to our vision, and then he would ask us whereabouts in the Bible we would find that. And that I found quite tricky. And so I would then say, happily, can I have a few minutes to think about that? And I would then go back and think about that, and I would come back later on. Partway through the day at lunchtime, we had an opportunity to sit down, and David gave me an overview of roughly what his observations were so far, where we've been, and what he needed to look at next, and maybe where he gave me some insights, and maybe where he wasn't quite seeing what he needed to see. And then that gave me the opportunity to go and gather that information, be that whether that was, for example, the evidence of the governors having more of an impact from the ethos committee. And then at the end of the whole process, myself, my senior leaders and my governors had a meeting with David, and that's when he fed back to all of us. And then we received our report. I want to say it's 2 weeks roughly, something like that. Afterwards, we received our report for us to check before we had to send it back a year and it got published.
Thanks. That's really helpful. There's a question from group 2. This is really interesting. David, I don't know if you want to take this. How might you develop, or how might a school develop evidence for SIAMS when few children and families go to church and the community is not hugely engaged in the parish?
Well, I think first of all, that's the norm nationally, but the school as a church school is there to serve. That's part of its root, part of its calling. It's there to serve, and the vision points outwards into the community, because does the vision meet the needs of its community? In reaching out, it needs to evaluate how effectively it does reach out and what difference it makes. And it will need to be aware of the different people that make up the local community and talk with them. Certainly, yes, not all of them. In fact, the majority will or may not have a religious faith. But I would say one of the consistent comments that parents make is, I'm not religious myself. However, the Christian values are those that make a difference for my children. And that's what they tell me. And I think that's universally so. The Christian values are appreciated and valued, and parents are coming back be saying, yeah, this is what we find. We like this school because, and it makes a difference.
Thanks, David. Anna, and I was thinking, of course, gathering evidence according to the 6 IQs. It covers a lot more than relationship with the church, doesn't it? There's so much more.
Can I answer that a little bit about that?
Yeah, please.
That was actually exactly where we were at when I came into the schools that we're in, and the parish and school leaders conference last year that the diocese put on had a real big focus on that, and it was very much about I'll be honest, lots of our families do not go to our community churches, and it was about us just trying to bring those Christian values into everything we do. And that was even down to us having opportunities in school to just have family services. I had a parent, I can't remember if it was actually when David was there or if it was at another forum, who said that they're not religious and they don't choose to go to church all the time, but they come to our family services because they're just about good values. And it's just embedding that. It doesn't have to be all about the church all the time. It just has to be about those Christian values underpinning everything that you do. And I think just by doing that in your collective worship all the time, in your community events, and in how your staff are modelling that, I think that can make a lot of evidence to cover that.
Yeah, thank you.
Pauline, Louise Leach has got her hand raised. I don't know if it's relevant to that particular question.
It is around that, actually. Just to say as a caveat, our school has which is a church school, but there are a lot of parents of other faiths, and they object to these values being called Christian values. They say they should be called human values. And so we're having kind of, what is it? Because we think that our values and our behaviours are what makes us distinctively Christian, but they're going, no, you're just being kind of decent human beings. Any response or help you can give us with that?
I think that's something that comes up a reasonable amount. A lot of people would say these are human values, and as such, they buy into them. I think as a church school, what we say is our interpretation of these values come from the teachings of the church and from Jesus's example. And that's the difference, that we're looking at the values through that lens. I've not seen or witnessed a great deal of issue about that, I must admit. People are happy to take them as humanistic values, even though the school is presenting them as Christian values. So I think it's about trying to weave the two together. And I think you've got to be sensitive, but I think it's possible from my experience.
Yeah, thanks, David. This might also be for you, David. The one group would like some pragmatic advice on spirituality. I would just add to that we do run, you know, rather than trying to answer it in 2 minutes, we do run spirituality forums and spirituality training. So it might be worth looking at our CPD brochure for a bit of a longer answer. But if you can say it in 2 minutes, David,
Not sure I
pragmatic
can.
advice.
I'm
No.
sure it's Richard on the other end of that one, and I've been to Richard's schools. I think it's about having a joint understanding of what spirituality is. I think that's the first thing. Whole school coming together, parents, governors, to some extent, pupils. What does spirituality mean for them? And coming to an agreed understanding, and then working from there.
Yeah.
And
thank you.
That's the basis.
Thank you. This is for Kate. Any ideas about how to present evidence at the inspection? So on the day of the inspection, how to gather the evidence and in what form? I suppose, yeah, in what form? What evidence and in what form?
I don't think that we didn't make anything especially for the inspection. We just had the children's RE books, as they are always. We had our curriculum planning as we had developed it ourselves, and obviously we used a lot of the locally agreed syllabus curriculum and understanding Christianity. I think one of the things that helped us and that was quite useful to do quite regularly, we do a lot of pupil voice in our monitoring, and I think that gives children the confidence to be able to talk about it, because children are asked to talk about their work. And them having the piece of work with them was really helpful, because when they couldn't remember something, you could kind of go, why don't you look back in your book and look what you were doing? And that kind of looking at their work definitely helped them remember what it was that they had been doing, because they can't always remember otherwise. The only other thing that I just think probably did help us quite a lot was this big floor book that we had, and our floor book was literally how our vision has come together, and we build it over the year. So we're building one each year. So it's, for example, it's when we have had family services, or we've celebrated Christian festivals. It's been the programs, it's been photos of the children developing their spirituality through our forest school, through our music events, and it's very much was just us. It's something that we have out for our parents to see, or visitors when they come, and it's just a big photographic floor book of how our vision comes alive, and it's something we keep together all the time. And I think that was really helpful, because even if I was thinking, oh, how do we do that, I could look back through and go, oh yes, we do it in this way, we do it in that way. Spirituality in particular was one that we needed to evidence how we were doing, and we initially found that quite tricky. But then over time, we realised through our arts curriculum and our music and our forest school and using our beautiful environment, we were actually able to evidence it a lot more than we realised. And that was purely because we happened to have a floor book of our year that had all about when we'd gone on our school trips or our residentials. And we were the cake sale school who did have courageous advocacy was that. And actually we were being questioned by David around how the children do that. And it wasn't until he spoke to the children, I think it was the school council or collective worship ambassador, or one of the many groups of children that he chatted to, that one of them said, oh, I did this dog walking thing, and they remembered it, and we couldn't remember all of it. So I think it's just having faith a lot in the children in your schools as well. I'm not sure that really answers the question, but we didn't prepare anything specifically for it at all. It was just what we already had.
So do you have a book per year?
Yes,
per
so
school?
we've got well, no, because although we're two schools, we see ourselves as one school.
Yes.
Just because of our setup. So we just have one really large floor book which covers the whole year. And so what we tend to do, for example, is all of our family services or focus of collective worship, or if we've been doing something to do with one of our Christian values, we have them displayed in our hall, photographs of it. And then I've got a TA who is responsible. She reminds me and says, oh, we've just done that. You got some photos or a little bit of writing about it, or we'll ask the people to write it. It goes on our wall. And then once it gets full, she takes that down and puts it in the book. And then it just keeps going all the time when it's either on the wall in the hall or it's gone into the book.
Thanks.
And then we've started a new one this academic year.
Yes. Thank you. There, I can't see anything else in the chat. So if anybody just wants to raise their hand, who didn't write anything in the chat but was in a different group, perhaps if you would like to raise your hand, I will try and see. I'm on two screens, so I'll have to. Anybody else want to ask a question of Kate or David?
Sarah has got her hand up. Sarah Blake.
Thank you.
I think I did put the question.
Lottie has, I think. No, Sarah.
I did put the question in the chat, but maybe you missed it. Question for David, really. Any advice on either the length of the SEF or your preferred layout? I know our last SEF was incredibly long, and I'm not sure that every SIAMS inspector would like to read a really long one.
Believe you me, Sarah, I've had some wonderful variations. I would suggest short, to the point, evaluative. I know the workload is ahead. I was ahead for 21 years, so I know some of the stresses and strains. Be precise, don't make it too long. 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 at the very most. Having said that, I have received some at 106 pages. And what I found was it repeated itself time and time again, and you just lost the thread. So make it focused. And yes, it's important, but so is life. And I would think heads need a life. Does that answer the question, Sarah?
It does. Thank you very much.
If it's any help, I did use the formative one, the summary one, sorry, that's on the Bath and Wells page. And I've just checked, and mine was landscaping. It was five sides by the time I'd written a paragraph by each one. So 5 sides sounds a lot, but it actually wasn't very much. And I may have repeated myself in some of them because there was lots that overlapped.
Yes, the IQs, if you're looking for evidence against 6 or 7 IQs, they do inspection questions, they do overlap, don't they? Anybody else? And do let me know, David, if I can't see. And I'm sorry, Sarah, I didn't see your question in the chat. I don't know why. Anyway. Anybody else? We have about 5 minutes.
Oh, can I just ask? We were looking through our sheet last week at an ethos meeting, and there's quite a lot of questions regarding like the trust you're part of. Is that
absolutely? I mean, in each of the IQ questions, there is an element linked to being part of the trust. So, for example, in IQ 3, which is about collective worship, one of the questions I'm certainly going to be asking both to the head and to the CEO or representative is, how does the trust support and enhance the collective worship of the school? And that's going to be written up as part of the report. Similarly for IQ 6, how does the trust MAT support the development of RE? Because the majority of schools are in a MAT, and what role does that make? What contribution do they make to the life of this as a church school? And that's an important part.
Yeah, okay, it's something for us to think about, because we're part of a really big trust, but it's not like a church-based trust or anything. So we need to think more about how we will approach that one, I think.
But if the trust and the MAT has accepted church schools in, they then have a responsibility to meet the needs of those church schools.
Yeah.
And there will be a paragraph in, I think, every SIAMS report about partnerships and relationships. And in it will be an evaluative comment about the role that the MAT has.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's true. Lottie, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. If I may, a question to David. At the beginning, David, you said it's be evaluative, and what difference does it make? What is the impact? And I think I find it very difficult to measure what the impact is. I think you have to compare two moments in time. And what do you do in between? So you have point A, you do something, and then you have point B, and you are better. I find it very difficult to understand what impact in this framework is.
I think you're talking to the children, talking to the staff, gaining information from parents. You've done an initiative in RE, collective worship, relationships, whatever. What difference? What do the children now say? What do they tell you about what they've done? And yes, it can be comparative, and you might be saying, a year ago, these were the answers the pupils gave, and these are the answers that the children gave now. And you could well point out there is a difference. They're using a different language, they're doing different things, they're telling you there is a difference. It's never a numerical. It is a subjective. But what are they saying? Does that sort of begin to make... Lottie, does that begin to make sense?
I'll work with that.
Yes, sometimes it's impact over time, and sometimes it might be a short impact on the children, mightn't it? Yes, I can see.
I think it's sorry to interrupt. I think it's important that I would say that when David came to our, he didn't just look at the children. He also asked the staff and some of the parents and some of our members of our church community how they felt about the impact of our schools, as to whether they felt involved in the schools, whether they felt their voice was listened to. Did our staff feel supported and that we cared about their well-being? So it was kind of trying to make sure what we had as our school vision wasn't just for the children, actually it was for our staff and our community as well. So we did have staff members and members of the community that felt that they could see that in the last 18 months things had they felt more involved, and they felt their voice was heard, and they felt that if they had a problem they'd have someone to go to. So I think that was evidence of impact as well.
Thank you.
Pauline,
go on, David.
Pauline, I just wanted to add something to Fliss, your question when you were talking about the trusts. And it's just an observation that many of our trusts are developing leaders within the trust who will focus on their church schools, and particularly with SIAMS. So that is something worth exploring if you are in a trust, to ask that question of the CEO. What is the trust doing? Is there somebody who's going to have that focus? Because we are seeing increasingly that occurring at a senior leadership level within trusts.
I think there's two things.
Thank you.
I think there's two things to say there, David. And the first is, if a church school is in a MAT, I am now obliged to contact the CEO or their representative and have a discussion with them prior to the inspection about discussing what that relationship is. And I'm going to be asking about vision and impact. So a CEO is going to need to be aware of what that is. And I'm increasingly aware, and I know it's certainly happening in Bath and Wells, but it's happening Salisbury, Exeter, Gloucester, Coventry, beyond, that MATs are increasingly taking up some of the role that previously the diocesan team did. And each of the MATs is having a leader of being a church school. So that's increasingly the model that might well be appearing. So I think you need to be aware of that. And I think there are a lot of MATs around who do that very well. And Salisbury seem to be very much a flagship for that development in their own diocese.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. I'm just going, we do need to draw this to a close, but I am just going to bring in Ruth Young, because Ruth is a trustee. She's also a member of our Diocesan Board of Education, and I know is as a trustee is quite passionate about the role of the MAT. Ruth.
Thank you, Pauline. I remember the lady was from North Leeds, but I'm sorry. Oh, was it Fliss? Was your name Fliss? Sorry. I was just going to say that in addition to what David's saying about the trust in the central team, probably having some sort of lead developing for SIAMS and the church schools. Also, you've got your foundation trustees that are on your board that you could link up with and maybe tell them what you need, tell them what you're looking for. So so I'm somehow leading on as a foundation trustee and making links with the schools that are going to have their SIAMs during this academic year. And really I'm saying to them, what can I do for you? What do you need? So I'd encourage you to go to your trust board. Or maybe your chair of governors go to your trust board and encourage them to engage.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did say we would finish at 5, and it is just gone 5. I just want to say a very big thank you to you all for coming and for engaging and for discussing together. I want to say a particular thank you to David and to Kate. This session wouldn't have been what it is without them. So a very, very big thank you to them. If this is a model that you appreciate, it would be good to know. It would be good to know how often and whether to put a SIAMS Forum on as well as the normal training that we do. So that's it, really. I just wanted to say thank you, a very big thank you. Somebody's saying, yes, please, they would like another SIAMS Forum. Maybe we'll have to find another head teacher and another inspector. That would be great, wouldn't it? Thank you for coming, and have a good evening.